Well, there are a lot of issues that have come up on that budget, and some, though, of Nigerians who have raised eyebrow on some areas in relation to that budget. You remember what was said on the floor of the Senate on the issue of the ways and means, the expenditures that have been made by the executive, which did not get the approval of the National Assembly before spending those money. What are these issues? Legal issues, moral issues, and the issues that pertain to handshake between the executive and the legislature. Of course, we'll talk about the CBN policy. The man who moved that motion to extend the withdrawal limit is here, or the Naira notes policy of the CBN is here with me in the studio. Senator Ali Ndume, representing Borno South in the National Assembly. Thank you so much, Senator, for coming tonight.
Thank you.
First and foremost, before we take a break, you were very passionate about that policy of the CBN. And you are not even the only one. Senator Bukochua said, look, in his constituency, that several months or years, there hasn't been any functional bank in his constituency. It's the same thing happening with you.
Yeah.
And this is what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah. In my state, I said it before, we have 27 local government. You can only find banks in 5 or 6 local government. The rest, 20 to 21, have no banks at all right now. Those banks that were operating there before were closed down or even destroyed by the insurgents. And some of the areas, they don't have network, so it's not easy to even do transaction with POS. Besides that, the new notes, I only saw it myself as a senator on Wednesday when I raised the motion, and I told my colleagues that I have not even seen the new notes. So the policy is good. From time to time, you need to do that. But when you do it, you don't do it to hurt anybody, or you don't target anybody.
Do you think this is targeted at some...
To the poor. The poor will be victim of this. Many Nigerians are poor. We agreed. The statistics is there. Over 133 million people are poor.
Multidimensionally.
Yeah, multidimensionally. That means that if you check, most of these people that are 63% of the population may not have even access to these financial services. The money they have may not be that money that they will take to the bank, but they have them. And they don't have access to banks to get the new notes. I've been withdrawing money from the bank since 15th, but I've never been given the new notes. In fact, they are giving me new old notes. New old notes.
Do you suspect any ulterior motive about this?
No, I don't.
But those who have, those in the position said this is actually is a political move.
Well, even if it's political move, it will affect everybody. I'm APC, we are in the government, we want to retain the government, want to come back as a government. So I don't think that the president is targeting politicians, if to say...
It may not necessarily be the government. Could be politicians who are working with the CBN. Those are the theories of some politicians.
Well, which theory? I'm a politician, do you forget?
No, but you are in the ruling party.
So, okay, you see, do we do politics that...
You heard what Senator Seriake Dixon said. That you cannot do some of this policy in the middle of an election.
No, it doesn't matter. For me, you see, the way they are doing it is the problem. And as I said, my own motion was simple. And it was Nigerian motion. It was not my motion. And for me, this change of money and then make me withdrawal and all that does not bother me.
But it doesn't.
But it bothers the people that I represent and Nigerians in general. Nigerians will suffer. We had this experience in 1984, and I was lecturing in the Polytechnic. I knew what...
Is it that the CBN is not aware? Or what is... are they not aware of all of these indices?
Well, I don't know about that, but you see, it's not even the CBN that matters. CBN is an appointee of the president. The CBN is virtually a cashier glorified cashier of the government. Pay, he pays. Do this, he does it. So the truth of the matter is that the president must be made to understand that majority of Nigerians that are poor or middle income will be the victim, especially in the north, where we don't have banks and where our people move from market to market with raw cash, with no banks.
There's another theory is that is to stop some of you politicians from doing vote buying.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know about that.
So if there are no networks like you mentioned, so how do we conduct the elections?
I told you before. We did election before without these networks. We did 2 elections. 2015, we did our election in the camp. There was, insurgents drove us away from 22 local government. We did it in the camp, and it was credible. I chose to be the credible. So it's not all over Nigeria. Majority of the states have network services, and they can do that. But
Senator,
the few of our states...
The motion you moved is not an approval from CBN just yet. Doesn't mean that the CBN has accepted to shift it. So it just means something.
No, it means...
that their earlier policy still stands.
Well, we'll see how it goes. They are to serve the people. I voiced out what the people want.
Should they decide to go ahead, what would the Senate do?
We'll still take when they get to the bridge, we'll cross it. I'm trying to even reach...
It's just in a few days anyways.
No, it's not a few days, it's 4 weeks. Yeah, 4 weeks, so it's not a few days.
So we'll take a break, Senator, because there's so much to talk about. We'll talk about this, the details of the budget. The issue of ways and means is another thing. Can the executive spend money without the approval of the Senate or the National Assembly?
They're not supposed
to. So what were you guys doing when they were doing that?
When we don't know. When they were spending this money, we didn't know. It was only on 20th December that we were informed.
We'll allow you to explain more, Senator. But we'll take a break.
Okay.
We'll take a break, everyone. So much to talk about. Senator Ali Ndume is still with me. We'll be right back, everyone.
The reason for this is because the appropriation bill came to the National Assembly with some problems. And when our committees on appropriation in the Senate and the House started to reconcile the figures of what we have done and what was presented, the problems became very obvious and they were not easy to deal with.
Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Senator Ali Ndume, the senator representing Borno South in the National Assembly, and is also the chair of the Senate Committee on the Army. Thank you so much indeed for coming. The matter which I was asking, how come you and your colleagues were raising the eyebrow only when the deed has been done? You guys were not happy that those monies have been spent and before approval is now being sought to in the National Assembly.
We didn't know. We only knew on 20th December when Mr. President wrote to the Senate asking us to approve the 22-point-something trillion that was spent from the CBN through the Ways and Means. That was what triggered the argument. And most senators say that, and most importantly, it was just a 2-page report. There were no details as to what the money was used for. And it would have been ridiculous or disservice if we just go ahead to approve what? And that was the question we asked.
All right. So because a lot of our viewers may not really get the meat of the matter. So the ways and means are loans or advances by the Central Bank of Nigeria to the federal government to enable the government to cater for short-term or emergency financing to fund delayed government expected cash receipt of fiscal deficit. It just means that when government is in some kind of trouble or in need of urgent funds, ways and means are the means where the CBN give the money to the federal government to be able to execute this emergency project. But it's in the tune of 22 trillion naira.
Yeah.
And without the consent of the National Assembly.
Yeah.
Is that right or wrong?
It's wrong. It's wrong. And this thing has been going on even before Buhari became the president.
So it's become a norm. The illegality,
the illegality has been going on. And I think when he met it like that, they continued in that path, but now realize that actually the National Assembly have to approve it. But then I asked my colleagues that time, when the money is already spent, you don't approve it, you only rectify it. Then that brings us to constitutional matter, whether even the National Assembly has the right to do what it is asked to do. I know that in the Constitution gives us approval powers, and after you approve, you oversight. But I don't think the National Assembly has the right to rectify an act that is being done. Because the Constitution is very clear. Every income, whatever the government is doing, must be approved by the National Assembly. What the president is asking for is not approval, it's ratification.
Of what had already been spent.
Yeah.
Is there possibility,
the
Senator,
now,
that the government can spend some money that are not captured in the budget?
No.
So every kobo that is spent by government has to be approved by the National Assembly.
That is what the Constitution says.
So,
but for a very long time, remember the arms deal something?
Yeah.
It was money that was spent without the approval of the National Assembly. It was during Jonathan. So this thing has been going on for a very long time, and I think it must be addressed. In fact, I'm wondering whether we even have the right to do what we have been asked to do. Constitutionally. No, it's not approved. Remove that word.
No, ratification, rather.
Does the National Assembly have the right to rectify? We are to approve and oversight.
That's a fact after the issue, after the matter.
No, but we don't know.
So, so what I mean, you guys have rejected it. Rejecting or not rejecting doesn't, it doesn't validate.
No, we didn't reject it. We stood it down and set up a special committee to look at it.
And you wanted details. That's what you're asking.
Yes. And even if we get the details, my question remains. Do we even have the right? Do we have the right
to sit on it? No,
not to sit on it.
To accept it?
No, to rectify. It is not approval. Approval is when you seek the consent of the National Assembly to do something. But when you have already done it, that is...
So when you even say that for a 22 trillion naira expenditure, you were only given a 2-page explanation for the ratification, means that explanation really is not given.
Yeah. The only explanation is for the 819.5 trillion that we approved out of it. They brought a supplementary budget which will be funded through the same process. That is Ways and Means.
So there's something fishy.
No, I don't know about fishing. I'm not a fisher.
All right. The budgets that you and your colleagues passed into law, the appropriation bill 2023, let me allow you to listen to what the Senate President said. That budget will not be signed by the President this year. It's the last budget under the Buhari administration, but it won't be signed until next year. These are the reasons. Listen to the Senate President, everyone.
We are very pleased that we have been able to, in the last 4 years, ensure the passage of the appropriation bills in record time before every Christmas, and Mr. President had always signed before the end of the year. This year particularly is because of the anomalous, very undesirable and unfortunate situation that we had to delay a little bit. You recall that the National Assembly had to cut down its recess, Christmas recess, to come back on Wednesday for the sole purpose of passing the appropriation bill that we could have passed a week before. So all the same, there's nothing that to be missed. This administration, working between the executive and the legislature, has succeeded in bringing into regularity the appropriation bill all the 4 years so far into the regular, very desirable and predictable January to December budget for our country.
You heard it. So, what do you have to say to that?
Nothing. You see, I think my position is almost like very clear now to Nigerians. Yeah, we kept our agreement on our part, and that is, returning Nigeria into the budget cycle of January, January to December. But we just passed an extension of the time to implement the budget. That means that the budget will be implemented, even passed within the time framework. It will be implemented in 15 months instead of 12 months. You pass the budget timely, but the implementation is delayed. We had to now extend the budget by 90 days. We also had to pass a supplementary budget, and that is another problem or another issue that I have problem with.
With the supplementary budget?
Yes.
What's the problem with that?
The supplementary budget is important, but I said it in my contribution, that how can you bring supplementary budget 3 days to the end of the year? That day was the day we extended the budget by 90 days. How realistic is it going to be to now implement the 819.5 trillion or billion budget in 90 days? Knowing the fact that due process must be followed and the money will have to be borrowed, even though it's going to be within, but even the documentation and all that cannot be completed. So I raised the matter and I said, why don't we put that 819 billion in the 2023 budget, which we passed on that day? It was a Wednesday. But as usual, I can have my say, but the Senate had its way.
Now, if you look at it, out of the, because the project presented by the president was 20.51 trillion, you and your colleagues increased it to 21 trillion. That's an additional almost 2 trillion that was added to the
1.3.
Yeah, now, so if you look at it, out of that, 6.6 trillion naira is for debt servicing. Are you worried about that?
Yeah, very worried.
Increasingly, we're having to service debt with a huge percentage of the budget.
I have said it before. I'm worried about it. There's a need to address that. There's the need to look at it. There's the need to call in Nigerian financial experts, which we have many, to advise the government and to do something about it. But I'm more worried about the recurrent expenditure of 8-point-something trillion. I said it even when the president presented the budget. I don't understand it up to now. Why would Nigeria be spending 8.3 on recurrent expenditure? And that recurrent expenditure means the money that is being used to pay public servants.
That's almost 45% of the entire budget.
It's too much. It's so much. It's even more than...
Is there anything that we can do to salvage that situation?
Yeah, we have to look at it in-depthly. But you have never done that. We didn't even have the time. This budget was rushed. You don't rush budget. I mean, what sense does it make that, you have returned us into January, December, and then you don't even implement the budget? You have to expend it 3 days by 3 months or even more than that. And then you have some figures, funny figures in the budget, and questions when asked, are not properly answered. And then you say, okay, let's pass the budget. Let's pass the budget before. We came on Wednesday, looked at the budget, passed it, and then came to the same day, adopt the budget. But for me, the National Assembly is cooperating with the executive. If that's what you want, take it, go and do it. That is what we have been doing.
I mean, Senator, you and your colleagues have been heavily criticized. Yes. So the president presented...
Criticized for what?
Yeah, for the money that you have appropriated to yourselves.
Like how much?
You have, the president presented a budget of 169 billion to the National Assembly, and it was jacked up in the end to 228.1 billion. That was what the National Assembly approved. That is a 59.1 billion increase. Is that fair?
I don't know, it's you to judge it, but the details are there. My own is, I ask you, out of that 200 and something, it's 30 billion that is for Senate. The rest, the details is there. A representative, I think House of Representatives has 56 billion or so. And then the details are there. Our workers have been going on strike, for non-payment of their entitlements. some of the people that serve the National Assembly that are out, that have retired, have not been paid their pension. It's only fair that that is captured in the budget, and that was what happened. But what is exactly going to the House of Representatives and the Senate have even actually gone down, because we are used to budgeting 100 billion or slightly over. But this time around, Senate have 56, and I mean 30, about 30 billion, and the House of Rep has 56. If you put that together, it's 86 or thereabouts.
But Senator, I mean, if you're spending this amount of money and incrementally every budget year there is an increase from 125 billion to 128 billion, it went to 134 billion, 169 billion was what the president presented. It jumped to 228 billion in a country where 133 million people are said to be multidimensionally poor, and the National Assembly, the two chambers, are being serviced with over 200 billion. Does that make sense?
It doesn't. But let me ask you this question. You are now, because you are privileged to be talking to Ndume directly, and my friend, you keep on asking me, you are taking, I told you now that it's 30 billion that is going to the Senate. That is, I'm a member. And I'm telling you that the recurrent expenditure to less than 1 million workers, or maybe at most 2 million, is increasing, has been increasing from 4.5 trillion to now 8.3 trillion, and you're not questioning that.
I'm saying
Are you
that
doing your job?
there's a systemic problem. I'm doing my job, that's what I'm asking you.
Why don't you ask the
Because
public?
you sit there in the National Assembly. If things are not right, we need to fix it. As a citizen of Nigeria, you have the privilege in being the National Assembly.
Okay,
so that privilege
now, let me ask you
and
this.
I have a privilege of speaking to you.
Yeah, let me ask you this question.
Shouldn't we fix the problem?
Yeah, we should fix the problem. But when you're looking at a problem, you look at the bigger problem. The bigger problem is our recurrent expenditure, and you know what it is moved from 2016 from 4-point-something trillion to now 8.3 trillion. And I mentioned the figure, and I told you I'm worried about that. And you are saying, no, I'm even more worried about your 30 billion. Is that fair?
Senator, unfortunately, I would love to have more time with you. You know, each time I interview you, it's not always very easy. Thank you so much, Senator, for coming on. I appreciate it. And I wish you a happy new year, because the next time I will be seeing you is going to be in 2023.
Oh.
And I hope you to win your election anyways.
Well,
I wish you luck.
Inshallah.